"Hey, what are you doing in that trash?" James Taylor's voice echoed into the freezing New York street, his breath fogging as he stepped out of his black Escalade. The girl didn't flinch. She kept digging. She was tiny, maybe 7, her sweater soaked in snow, her fingers red and trembling. On Christmas Eve, outside his $30 million brownstone, a child was scavenging through garbage like an animal, and in that moment, James's world, built on steel and money and silence, began to crumble. He took a step forward, leather shoes crunching on the frozen sidewalk. His coat, custom-made, wool-lined Italian, did nothing to protect him from the sudden chill that ran through his chest. The child looked too small for the pile she was buried in. Her black hair was tangled and wet. Her sneakers, 2 different colors, were torn, soles flapping as she shuffled forward, unbothered by the voice that had just called out to her. What are you doing?" James repeated, his tone softer now, less startled, more human. The girl pulled out a half-eaten burger, wrapped in foil, stiff with frost. She wiped it gently against her sleeve, looked around quickly, then pressed it to her lips. That image seared into his memory like a photograph he didn't want to take. He couldn't look away. "What's your name?" he asked. She paused mid-bite, her eyes lifted slowly, green, glassy, guarded, the kind of eyes that had seen more nights than mornings. "Jasmine." The word was barely a whisper. He almost didn't catch it. She returned to her meal like the moment hadn't happened. James blinked, trying to place the name. Something about it rattled him, but he shook it off. Could have been coincidence. Still, something pulled him closer. "Where's your mom?" he asked, crouching slightly. No answer. "Dad?" She didn't look up. "How long have you been out here?" Silence. The wind picked up, blowing a flurry of snow across the curb. Jasmine's lips quivered. Her hands shook as she tucked the burger into the pocket of her oversized hoodie, the sleeves dangling well past her hands. "Do you live nearby?" James asked, this time with a kind of hesitation that surprised even him. She stared at him. A long pause. Then a quiet, "No." His throat tightened. The street behind them was lined with glittering lights, holiday wreaths, ornaments, families inside windows, laughing, cooking, unwrapping gifts early. The contrast made his stomach turn. "I'm not trying to scare you," he added. He stopped himself. What was he even doing? He wasn't the guy who stopped. He wasn't the man who asked questions. He didn't involve himself. But here he was, heart pounding, knees bent in front of a trash bin, on Christmas Eve. And she was still staring at him, like she couldn't decide if he was danger or hope. "Come with me," he said quietly. "It's too cold. You can warm up. I won't touch you. Just come inside." The girl backed away. James stood, hands raised. "Okay," he said quickly. "No pressure. I just don't want you to freeze out here." She didn't run, but she didn't answer. A horn blared from down the street. The moment cracked. James hesitated, then turned toward his townhouse, walking slowly, reluctantly. He reached the door, fumbled with his keys, looked back. She was still there, sitting beside the bin, cradling that burger like it was the last safe thing in the world. He watched her curl up against the metal can, hugging her knees, snow collecting in her hair, and for the first time in years, James Taylor walked into his mansion, feeling completely, irreversibly, alone. James Taylor didn't sleep. He stood in his penthouse kitchen, warm, marble-clad, whisper-quiet, staring into a glass of untouched bourbon. The city lights glimmered beyond the tall windows like static stars, but all he could see was her. That child. That little girl in the snow. Jasmine. He'd watched the footage on the security camera 4 times. She hadn't moved from that bin. She'd tucked her arms into her sleeves, curled her legs to her chest, and let snow gather like a blanket over her shoulders. He had enough rooms to house 50 people. He had guest suites, heated floors, imported linens from Florence, and meanwhile, just 50 feet from his door, a child was freezing next to garbage. He set the bourbon down, hard. Moments later, the door slammed shut behind him as he stepped back into the cold. The wind hit him like regret. Jasmine hadn't left. She was still sitting there, head bowed, eyes half closed, the burger long gone, her fingers now too numb to hold anything. "Hey," James said, kneeling again. "You're still out here?" She looked up, lips too pale to part right away. Her cheeks were red, but not from embarrassment, from windburn. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded. "I've got hot chocolate," he added, "and a fireplace, and nobody else home." Jasmine hesitated, but this time she moved. She stood slowly, unsteady, and followed him, silently, past the black gate, up the stone steps and into the mansion. Inside, the contrast nearly broke him. The fire glowed warmly in the library. Stockings hung unused along the railing of the staircase. James hadn't touched a single decoration. His housekeeper did it out of habit. He hated holidays, but suddenly the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt punishing. Jasmine stood just inside the door, shivering in the hallway. She didn't step forward. "You can sit," James said gently. "Or I can bring you something." She pointed to the fireplace. He led her in. The girl crouched in front of the flames like she wasn't sure they were real. He returned with a tray, soup, bread and a mug of cocoa topped with whipped cream. Jasmine looked at the whipped cream like it was a dream. She didn't say thank you, but she ate like she hadn't in days. James didn't ask questions. He just sat across the room watching the firelight flicker across her face, and in that moment, something inside him cracked open. A voice he hadn't heard in years rose in his chest. If you'd only stepped in sooner, she might still be alive. His sister had said that the night his niece died. He'd missed the funeral. He thought about the past he buried beneath ambition, the voices he silenced with stock options, the holidays he skipped. He looked at Jasmine and realized that silence didn't protect him anymore. It only kept him alone. And if you're still watching this story right now, ask yourself, would you have walked past her? Would you have turned the other way? Pretended she wasn't there? You're still here because this story means something to you, so don't just scroll away. Subscribe. Not for me, but for every story like Jasmine's that deserves to be heard. Jasmine finished her soup. She wiped her mouth on her sleeve, looked up. "You have kids?" she asked. James blinked. "No." She stared at the fireplace again. "It's quiet here." "Yeah," he replied softly. "It always is." The steam from Jasmine's mug had faded, but she still held it close, cradling it like a treasure. The fire warmed her skin, but not her eyes. Those stayed cold, distant. James sat across from her, pretending to scroll through emails on his tablet. But he hadn't read a word. He had a meeting in the morning, boardroom decisions, shareholder calls, deals worth hundreds of millions waited on his approval, yet none of it felt heavier than the weight of this child sitting silently across from him in his own living room. At the time. 11:42 p.m. Christmas Eve. "What am I doing?" "Do you want to call someone?" he asked. Jasmine didn't look up. "There's no one to call." James shifted in his seat. "You have any family, friends?" She shrugged. He tried again. "Do you go to school?" A long pause. Then, "I did." He waited. Nothing more came. The silence between them stretched too far, not the comforting kind, the kind that warned you someone had learned to survive alone. James rose and walked to the window. Snow still fell, blanketing the city in hush. He could feel her watching him, not with curiosity, but caution, like she was trying to decide whether he was safe or temporary. He spoke without turning around. "You know you don't have to stay." "I know," she said simply. His chest tightened. He wasn't sure why he said it. Maybe because he was afraid of needing something from her. Maybe because he didn't want to admit how much her presence filled something he never talked about. He poured himself a glass of water, took one sip, set it down. "You don't trust people, do you?" he asked quietly. Jasmine didn't answer. "You're smart not to," he added. "I wouldn't trust me either." That made her look up, just for a second, long enough to see the truth in his face. In the quiet that followed, James began pacing slowly. "You know," he said, almost to himself, "when I was a kid, I used to sit in the back of my dad's car and watch people digging through trash on Christmas Eve. My father would shake his head and say, 'Some people choose to be like that.'" Jasmine stared. I believed him for a long time. A crackling sound from the fireplace filled the gap between his words. "Until tonight," he finished. Jasmine stood suddenly. James turned, alarmed. "What's wrong?" "I'm not a project," she said flatly. "I don't need fixing." The words stabbed. "I didn't say you were," he replied carefully. "But you're thinking it." He didn't deny it. And that silence, that pause, said everything. She picked up the blanket he'd given her and dropped it back on the couch. "Thanks for the food," she muttered. "Wait," he said, stepping forward. She froze. "I'm not trying to fix you, I just—" He trailed off. What? Felt guilty? Needed redemption? Wanted to matter? He couldn't even say it. "I just wanted to help." She looked over her shoulder, her voice small. "People don't help unless they want something." He swallowed hard. "What do you think I want?" She didn't answer. She turned back toward the door. James stood there watching her walk away, again unsure if stopping her would do more harm than good. And for the first time in a long time, the billionaire who owned more than most men could dream of didn't feel in control of a single thing. Jasmine didn't make it far. The front door closed softly behind her, swallowing the warm air she'd just walked out of. But the cold outside wasn't the same as before. It had changed. The wind was sharper, the snow thicker. Tiny icicles clung to the edges of parked cars. Streetlights flickered in the white haze like distant stars dying out. She walked a few blocks, maybe less. Her legs were tired. Her hands nearly purple. She turned a corner and leaned against the side of a frozen newsstand. Her breath came in short gasps. Her chest felt tight. And then her knees buckled. Back inside the townhouse, James stood by the fireplace, unmoving. The blanket she dropped lay at his feet. He glanced at the door for the 10th time, a war raging in his chest. He told himself she needed space, that she'd be fine, that this wasn't his responsibility. But a voice he hadn't heard in over a decade whispered inside his mind, "You had one job, to protect what's left." He grabbed his coat. He found her crumpled beside a lamppost 3 blocks down. "Jasmine!" he shouted, rushing forward. She was conscious, barely. Her lips were blue. "I'm okay," she murmured, then coughed, a dry, painful sound that stabbed at the night air. "You're not okay," James muttered, scooping her up without hesitation. She didn't fight. She was too tired. Back at the house, he laid her on the leather couch, wrapped her in 2 blankets, and turned the fireplace higher. Then he grabbed his phone. "Don't call anyone," she croaked. His hand froze. "I don't want a shelter. They'll just move me again." James slowly put the phone down. "Then you stay here," he said quietly, "as long as you need." Her eyes searched his face, looking for the trap. "What do you want from me?" she asked again, weaker this time. "I don't want anything," he replied. "I just don't want to find you frozen next time." Her face softened, just slightly. "I'll be fine tomorrow," she whispered. He knelt beside her. "You don't have to be." She stayed. That night, Jasmine slept in a warm bed with clean sheets, the first in what felt like years. James sat outside her door most of the night, sipping coffee, eyes wide open, thoughts racing. He didn't understand it yet, but something had already changed. This wasn't a rescue, it was a return to something he'd abandoned long ago, and maybe right now. As you're listening to this, maybe you're not just watching a story. Maybe part of you is remembering a time you needed someone and no one came. Don't let this be another video you forget. Subscribe, because stories like Jasmine's, they don't just entertain, they remind us that we still have hearts. Morning arrived slower than usual. The city outside buzzed softly with Christmas morning routines, families waking up, coffee brewing, wrapping paper, tearing in loud joy. Inside James Taylor's brownstone, silence held the space between breaths. He stood outside the guest bedroom, unsure if he should knock. Instead, he walked away. In the kitchen, the espresso machine hissed to life. Bacon sizzled. Toast popped. He wasn't sure if Jasmine even liked bacon. He wasn't sure what 7-year-olds were supposed to eat. Hell, he didn't even know what they were supposed to sound like. When Jasmine entered the kitchen, barefoot and quiet, James nearly spilled the coffee he was pouring. "You're up," he said, trying to sound casual. She nodded. Her hair was brushed, clumsily but brushed. She wore the same clothes as yesterday, now warm and dry. "I made breakfast," he added. "You hungry?" She hesitated, then walked slowly to the stool at the counter. He placed a plate in front of her. She stared at the eggs for a few seconds before picking up the fork. James poured juice. "Do you remember how long you've been out there?" "A while." "Where were you before the streets?" She kept chewing. Then, "Places." He nodded, not pushing. She glanced at him. "You don't ask like other grown-ups." "How do they ask?" "Like they already don't believe me." That line twisted something inside him. "I believe you," he said. She didn't answer, but she ate. After breakfast, Jasmine wandered into the study. She moved like a ghost, lightly, carefully, as if afraid to touch things. James followed and watched her fingers trail along a dusty bookshelf. "Do you read?" he asked. She nodded. "When I get to." "What do you like?" She pointed at a thick spine. "That one." He looked. The Secret Garden. "Classic," he said. "I read it in foster care." James's jaw tightened. "You've been through a lot." She shrugged again. "Everyone's been through something." He almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the most grown-up thing he'd heard all week. Then came the moment. She picked up a small photo frame from the shelf. James hadn't noticed it in years. The photo was faded, taken during a summer on the Cape. His sister, smiling, a toddler girl in her lap, covered in sand and grinning with 2 missing teeth. "That your kid?" Jasmine asked. James froze. "No," he said slowly. "That's my niece." "What happened to her?" "She died," he replied, his voice quieter than he expected. Jasmine placed the photo down carefully. "What was her name?" A pause. Then, like pulling a memory from behind a locked door, he said, "Jasmine." The air between them changed instantly. He looked at her, really looked, and she looked right back. "I didn't name myself," she whispered. He blinked. "What?" "I never told you my last name." He stepped forward. She opened her small palm and pulled out a frayed photograph from her pocket, folded so many times it looked like tissue. He took it, opened it, and there she was. The baby from the beach photo. Same cheeks, same smile. His heart dropped through the floor. "I thought she died," he said, stunned. "They said the fire." "They said a lot of things," Jasmine whispered. And just like that, everything changed. The snow hadn't let up. New York outside the window looked like something from a postcard. Rooftops coated in white, car tracks vanishing under powder, streets quieter than usual. Inside James's brownstone, something else was settling too. Not silence this time. Stillness. Comfort. Jasmine sat on the living room floor, wrapped in a new blanket. Not expensive, not branded, just soft, thick, warm. She held The Secret Garden in her lap, legs crossed, eyes moving carefully over the words. James was nearby at the piano. He hadn't touched it in years, but this morning something made him open the lid. He didn't know what he was playing, just let his fingers move. Chords floated into the room, quiet, unsure of themselves. "I didn't know you could play," Jasmine said without looking up. "I didn't either," he answered honestly. She smiled. Later they ate lunch on the floor, not at the 12-seat mahogany table. Just two people sitting on a rug sharing leftover pancakes and clementines. Jasmine peeled one slowly, like it was something precious. "I used to eat these with my mum," she said suddenly. "She'd take out all the seeds for me." James said nothing. He just passed her the last one. She looked at it, then handed it back. "You can have it." He blinked. "You sure?" She nodded. In his world, people fought for control, for power, for deals. This felt like something entirely different. This felt like trust. In the afternoon, they built a pillow fort. Not for her, for both of them. Jasmine made the rules. No phones, no emails, and you have to wear socks. Bare feet are banned. James complied like it was federal law. They sat under the fortress of blankets and couch cushions, with a flashlight between them and a bowl of popcorn too salty. She told him about a foster home in Queens, where the lady had 12 cats and no heat. He told her about boarding school in Connecticut, where no one hugged him for 4 years. Somewhere in the middle, they both laughed, real deep belly laughs. By evening, the fire was going again. Jasmine sat curled in the corner of the couch holding the photo of the girl from the beach, the one she now believed was her, the one James still wasn't ready to say out loud. He watched her, that old familiar ache growing in his chest. "Jasmine?" She looked up. "I don't know how this happened," he admitted, "but I'm glad you're here." Her lower lip trembled. She blinked fast. "I don't know how to be someone's kid," she whispered. James moved closer. "And I don't know how to be someone's father." They sat in that confession for a long time. No promises, no guarantees, just two people, both broken in different ways, slowly learning how to be whole again. It started with a phone call. James had stepped into his study for a moment, just to check something. He told Jasmine he'd be back in a minute. She was watching cartoons in the pillow fort, bundled up like a kid who'd finally learned how to feel safe. The phone lit up with a name he hadn't seen in years, Carolyn Stone, Family Services. He almost didn't answer, but curiosity or guilt made him swipe. The conversation was brief. "I saw the footage on the security camera," she said. "You saw what?" "The girl, outside your house. I recognized her." James's spine stiffened. "She's been through 3 foster homes in the last 2 years," Carolyn continued. "Every time she disappears, it takes months to find her again. If she's with you now, we need to talk." James tried to respond, to process, but her next sentence cut through everything. "She's not safe in that house. You have no legal right to keep her there." When he returned to the living room, Jasmine was standing beside his desk, holding the phone, reading the email that had popped up from Family Services. Her voice was cold. "You called them?" "No," James said quickly. "I didn't. They reached out to me." Her face twisted. "You said I could stay." "I meant it." "Then why are they emailing you?" "Because they found out. I didn't ask them to come." "You're lying." "I'm not." She dropped the phone on the rug. "You're just like the others." James stepped forward. "I'm not. You let me build that stupid fort. You made pancakes. You gave me that book, like it meant something. And now you're sending me away?" "I'm not sending you anywhere," he shouted. The words bounced off the walls. She flinched. He froze, his hands in the air. "I didn't mean to yell." She grabbed her backpack, the one she hadn't touched since arriving. "Don't," he said. "I shouldn't have trusted you," she whispered. "I knew better." "Jasmine." But she was already halfway down the hallway. James chased after her. At the door she paused, hand on the knob. "I knew you'd ruin it," she said, "just like everyone else." And then the door opened. The cold rushed in, and she was gone. James stood there for a long time. Too long. The pillow fort looked stupid now. The book lay open on the couch, one tiny sock left inside it like a forgotten placeholder. He walked into the living room, sat down and stared at the fire. It didn't feel warm anymore, only empty. The city didn't care. Taxis still passed by with blinking signs. Couples still held hands under umbrellas. Kids still laughed in snow-covered parks. But Jasmine didn't care either. She sat curled inside a stairwell between a deli and a laundromat, her back pressed against a metal door. It was Christmas night, and her breath came out in soft clouds. She clutched her backpack to her chest like armor. Not again. Not again. Inside his brownstone, James stared at the door she had slammed behind her, still open. The cold crept in like shame. He didn't shut it. He just stood there, one hand pressed against the frame, the other trembling by his side. What had he done? No. What had he not done? He sat in her pillow fort. Because where else do you go when you've broken the one thing you didn't know you needed? The book was still there. He picked it up. A note fell out. Not a long one. Just 4 words, scribbled in shaky handwriting. Thanks for not yelling. James closed the book and leaned his head back. Across town, Jasmine huddled deeper into her jacket. She hadn't cried, not yet. Crying meant she believed it had ever been real, but her stomach twisted and her chest ached, not from the cold, from the familiar taste of being thrown away. She remembered the fire, the shouting, the hands pulling her away, and the man who never came back. Until now. Until someone had finally stayed, and then didn't. Her eyes began to sting. James paced. The voice in his head returned, quieter now, but sharper. You didn't just let her go, you proved her right. He thought of calling Carolyn back. He thought of running out the door, but he froze, caught between fear and guilt. What if she didn't want to come back? What if this time he was the one who wasn't enough? Jasmine stood. Her legs ached, her lips cracked. She started walking, no direction, just movement. And then something made her stop. A piano, faint but clear. She turned. It was coming from down the block, soft, hesitant notes. She walked toward it slowly, like being pulled by something she didn't want to believe in. James had left the window open. He didn't mean to play. His fingers just moved. The notes came broken, uncertain. The song wasn't even real. But maybe she'd hear it. Maybe she'd remember the quiet. Maybe she'd forgive him. From across the street, Jasmine looked up at the brownstone. The light was still on. The door, still ajar. And the music, still playing. She stood in the snow, staring, breathing, choosing. The snow crunched beneath Jasmine's sneakers as she stepped up to the gate. It was still open, like it had never truly closed. She hesitated, fingers curled into fists at her sides, then crossed the stone path and reached for the doorknob. The piano music stopped. The moment she stepped inside, the warmth hit her like memory. Firelight, cinnamon, and something that felt almost like home. James turned the corner, breath caught in his throat. She was standing there, small, soaked, eyes wide and trembling. Neither of them spoke, not for a long time. Then Jasmine whispered, "I thought you were different." James walked forward, slowly. "I am," he said. "I just didn't know how to be yet." She looked down, her voice cracked. "They always say, sorry." "I'm not sorry," James said softly. "I'm scared, and that's not the same." She blinked, unsure. "I'm scared I'll fail you," he continued. "But I'd rather fail trying than go another Christmas without you." Her lip quivered. "And if you'll let me, I'd like to try again." She stared at him, as if measuring the truth in his eyes. Then quietly, she stepped into his arms. It wasn't dramatic. No music swelled, no speech needed. It was just real. Small arms wrapped around a broken man, and for the first time since he lost her, James Taylor felt found. They spent the rest of the night by the fire, reading, drinking cocoa, and finally, talking about things that mattered. Jasmine told him everything, about the fire, the homes, the ones who forgot her name, the ones who called her a mistake. He listened, every word, no interruptions, no pity, just presence. He showed her the beach photo again, told her about his sister, her mother, and the day he promised to take care of the baby girl who never made it home. And then he told her the truth. He failed, but not anymore, not again. By morning they were asleep on the couch, him with one arm over her shoulder, her head resting on his chest, the fire still glowing, and just outside the window, snow still fell, but it didn't feel cold anymore. And maybe, just maybe, you've been watching this entire story because part of you needed to believe in second chances too, not the perfect ones, the real ones, the kind that come after everything's already broken. If this story moved you even a little, subscribe, not for the channel, but for yourself, because the world needs more people who don't walk past hurting children in the snow. Later that day, James stood on the same sidewalk where it all began. He looked down at Jasmine, bundled up, hands stuffed in mittens he bought that morning. "What were you even looking for?" he asked gently. She smiled. "Hope," he smiled back. "Did you find it?" She looked up at him, eyes calm now, steady, safe. "No," she said. "I think it found me."